Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's start with Secretary Reich. What should, yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you perfectly fine, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. What should the top individual tax rate be in your view?
Under President Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower, you may recall, the top rate,
Well, before my
marginal rate
time,
was 90.
I've heard about it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The top marginal rate was 91%. The top effective rate was about 43%. I don't think we need to go back to the Eisenhower years. He was a great president in many respects, but I think that we do need to substantially increase the top marginal rate from what it is today. And it's not just on income.
Just generally speaking, what would that look like? I mean, you don't have to give me an exact number.
I would say probably in the range of 40 to 50%.
Okay. What should the corporate tax rate be?
Are you asking me again, Senator?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I would say that the corporate rate probably ought to be, and again, we're talking about income taxes, corporate income taxes. I think that the top corporate income tax rate ought to be around 30%, maybe 35% where it was before. But the question with corporate taxes is always interesting because that's the real underlying question is who ultimately pays. I'm one of the people who thinks that maybe we ought to reduce the corporate income tax and increase capital gains taxes because it really is shareholders who bear or should bear most of the burden of the corporate income tax.
What should the capital gains rate be?
I think the capital gains rate should be probably around 25 or 28%. That would be my best guess. Warren Buffett obviously thinks that there ought to be a minimum 30% income tax, and that would be including capital gains. I think he may be right.
Okay. Do you support school choice for neighborhoods who have poor performing public schools?
Again, if you're asking me, Senator, I support school choice in the sense that I think that poor performing schools do need to be held accountable. The real question is what the choice is. I think that any organization, whether it's a charter school or a public school, ought to be in the position of offering a good education. And I've offered a proposal years ago. Nobody supported it except Jeb Bush. Governor Jeb Bush liked this idea, which was a voucher that would be inversely related to family income.
Oh, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. Mr. Lettieri, are you there?
I am.
Okay. Do you support school choice for poor performing schools for parents to have a choice?
Senator Graham, it's an important question, but it falls outside of the scope of my organization's work. So I'm happy to offer you my personal opinion, but I just want to make it clear it's not an issue that we've studied at EIG.
That's okay. About the tax rates that I've just talked about, what's your view on tax rates?
I think the question about where tax rates should be set is a complicated one because it depends on what other aspects of the code are a factor. So if
deductions and exemptions, right?
Exactly. So I think what we know about the corporate tax rate, for example, is that the
would you support a flat tax?
No.
Okay. Do you support tax reform to eliminate some deductions and exemptions?
Yes.
Okay.
As a general matter, I think a simpler tax code is good. A progressive tax code is good. And so I think if that's what you mean by tax reform, then the answer is yes.
Yeah. So my point here is if you wanted to improve the life of the average American worker, at what point does regulation and taxation on business trickle down to the inability to get good paying jobs in a growing economy? How much does tax and regulation impact the American economy and the ability of people to participate in it at a higher level?
Well, I think one of the things that's often misunderstood is that complexity is a subsidy to larger incumbent stakeholders. So the more complex an economy is, the more complex the regulatory system or the tax code is, the more likely it is to be gamed by those at the top, and the more likely it is to disadvantage those at the bottom. So as policymakers think about these questions, which are important, I think the implicit barrier to entry that's created by complexity is something that you should keep in mind, because it's something that certainly plays into the theme of robust competition and holding larger stakeholders to account through competition.
Yeah, one last question. Do you worry that if our tax rates are out of line on the corporate side with the rest of the world, that will incentivize American companies maybe to leave?
I think certainly that tax rates can be a disincentive. It's not the only factor that companies consider when they're looking at locational decisions. Trade policy, for example, plays a large role. But certainly, if the U.S. were to get way out of whack with the OECD average, I think that would be a problem.
Okay. Senator Graham, thank you. Senator Whitehouse.